I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
What's
Hello,
up?
everybody. What's up, AfterBuzzers? Welcome to the Letter for the King After Show. We're talking Season 1, Episode 1, Storm Clouds Gather. We are gathering here in our homes because of all the events surrounding the COVID-19 epidemic. So we are still going to be broadcasting for you here on Zoom for you all to talk about this great show. And we are ready to talk about it with you. We're going to be talking Shuri's Knight's Trials, Prince Viridian's plan, the War of Tribes, and so much more. We also have an exciting special segment called The Greatest Battles in History with Miss Tori, as well as some fun news and gossip with Benjamin. So we will stick around for all of that. I am your host, Brian Santos, and I am your resident lover of kings and queens because I am a queen myself. And I am here with my amazing panel to talk about this episode of TV. So we have Miss Tori, who is our lover of kingdoms. Tori, tell me about that, girl.
Yes, so I'm actually a diehard Game of Thrones fan, and I think that sparked my love
Yes.
of all kingdoms. And so I'm super excited to explore the different kingdoms in this new show.
Amazing. Love that. We also have Benjamin Schnau, who is our resident from the UK, giving us that European perspective.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, as I said already before, I used to live in the UK for a couple of years, right? So I know this environment. I think they shut some of that in the UK, so it's really exciting to see some of these environments again right now. So I'm really excited to talk about it because Game of Thrones was big, and I also have something in the news that I would like to talk about, which is a little controversial, but we're gonna talk about it later.
Amazing. Stick around for that, everybody. So this episode was so good, and I want to hear some of your overall thoughts. So Tori, what did you think about this episode?
It was definitely an informative episode. It's definitely the first episode, so we're trying to piece all these things together, and there was a lot of different layers in the episode. So I'm still trying to kind of piece together the storyline and see where this series is going to take us. It was very interesting to see the dynamic between the son and his stepfather, also the group of esquires that are training to be knights, and also kind of this prophecy that we're also following. It was kind of interesting to see how that's going to play out as well.
Awesome. And Ben, what did you think?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I definitely feel like there are different storylines, right? We basically start with these kids and they have to prove themselves, right? And I mean, the guy, who plays how do you say the Tiuri, right? He plays the
Mm-hmm.
lead. It's interesting because this is a typical kind of hero story, I feel to me, right? He's this kind of weak guy, the skinny guy, right? He has to prove himself, but then out of a sudden, he gets his chance of a lifetime. So I like this kind of storylines, right, where you can see someone grow. But I definitely feel like it feels like a little bit almost like Stranger Things a little bit at the beginning to me, where you have these young kids trying to figure it out and trying to make their way in life, but just basically back in the 18 or like thousands of years ago, you know. So I'm excited. The first episode leaves a lot of questions to me, though, you know. So I can't wait to watch episode 2.
Definitely. I definitely agree as well that it was a lot of things happening. And there definitely was a lot for just this first episode. We saw a lot of development with Churi. We saw his dynamic, like you guys mentioned, between him and his stepfather. So I think there's definitely a lot to break down. So let's jump right into Churi. So we start the episode off, of course, like you mentioned, with him and his stepfather. He is training to be a knight for these trials that we learn about, but he is not the best. He is, like you said, very small and meek, and he doesn't know what he's capable of. So we get to the Knight's trials, and there's a lot of things happening. We see these different characters of like Iona, who is a strong female knight. And we see that Churi loses his first joust, but he ends up winning his second joust. But it was discovered that he won that second joust because Sir Tiuri paid for the other knight to throw it. Now, Ben, what did you think about that? Did you feel that Sir Tiuri was justified in doing this, or was it right?
I mean, at the very beginning, when I met the stepfather for the very first time, watching him, I felt like, wow, he's really caring for the kid, and I think he does care for the kid, right? He adopted him at a very young age, so he sees himself like his real dad. I totally appreciate that. But then at some point, when they have this kind of conflict after the battle, when Tyrion finds out, oh my God, you paid this guy money to lose so that I can win. I feel like, wow, now he's showing me a side where I can feel it's even more maybe about his reputation than really helping his kid. I felt like, wow, it's more about how people think about him, and he don't want to be the loser like the stepdad who doesn't has a knight right now, because everyone in the family was always doing that, as he said, right? So everyone in the family always moved on in these battles, so no one was ever losing. And I think he couldn't deal with that, having won in the first time in the family who could not make it. So I think that was even more important to him right now at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was definitely more of like upholding that family legacy that he mentioned about, of there's such a strong lineage of all these knights in their family, and he's bearing his name, even though that's not his real son, he does have the Tiuri name. So I think that's definitely the complex he's dealing with. Tori, what did you think?
I thought it was definitely an interesting dynamic, just because the Tiuri's trainer was kind of telling him, you might not have these other qualities, but you do have these other qualities that make you a little bit of a harder target and things like that you can kind of work with. And I thought they were going to expand on that and kind of sharpen those skills, but instead I feel like the family kind of took the easy way out and paid his way through. So I was kind of like, darn, I really wanted him to find what makes him unique and what makes him strong in his own right and kind of go that route instead of paying his way through. But I think it also helps his character kind of develop into someone that he can be proud of as well. Like, he does have a lot to prove to both his stepfather, the other esquires that he's training with, his trainers and things like that. So I guess it kind of did help in the long run for his character development.
Definitely. And I saw those morals that he was dealing with, or that moral compass of basically he's like approaching his stepfather and like, how could you pay for that? I wanted to get here on my own merits and now I can't. So we'll see how that develops throughout the series. So we see a little bit more. We see some more characters after Tiuri. We also see Queen Alienor and Crown Prince Viridian. So they are basically the two like heads of the tribes that we see. We see it was gosh, I'm going to butcher all these names because they're like so medieval. They're hard to pronounce, but it's Uanawan and Dagonet versus Eviellan. It's kind of like Evian the water. But yeah, so we see those kind of dynamics of the queen announcing these trials and the crown prince. Now I want to pick your brain, Tori, because I thought this was really interesting that first we have the queen, then we see that knight Iona. And basically there's a lot of female dynamic here. What I think is interesting is back in those times, I'm used to seeing these medieval shows where it's all about men. There's no women. The queen is usually just this side character to a king. And then there's usually no women knights or no women defending the country. So how did you feel about that dynamic of women in this story, Tori?
I definitely noticed that in the beginning of the episode. Just seeing the young girl being an esquire was also, like you said, stuck out to me. I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out and what historical context they kind of bring to light to show, why that's in the show, because like you said, we don't see that a lot. And also with the queen dynamic, I wasn't so caught off guard by that, only because in Game of Thrones, the queen is kind of everything, given, what happens to her male counterpart. So that wasn't as surprising, but I am interested to see that dynamic. I do want to see her backstory and kind of see how she rose to power and how she plays this out. Is she going to give us the evil queen narrative? Is she going to be a queen for the people? What really is her role in this? I'm really interested to see. And also her dynamic with the other crown prince. I know they mentioned something about marriage in the episode, but it was kind of like blanketed over. So I want to see what this arranged marriage is supposed to be, what those power dynamics will be, because maybe she's an accomplished queen who has to marry a prince who hasn't really done much to earn his title. So I'm definitely interested to see that power struggle between the two of them.
Awesome. You brought up a lot of good points. Ben, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same thing. For me personally, I feel like we see a lot more in general. I think we see a lot more shows where also women now play the lead in general. I'm not just talking about this show, I talk about it in general. I think that's a great sign for everyone, right? So it's not just about, okay, we have the majority of these people doing the same thing. So we have a variety of shows where you see more Black people, you see more Asian people, and I really like that personally, because I feel like even for myself, coming from Europe, living in different melting pots in the UK, in Germany, in Berlin, that's what life is all about, right? So we basically have to share our experiences as different genders, different colors, but at the end of the day, we're just one human being race. That's how I see it, right? But we're coming from different backgrounds. And I think if you don't give people the opportunity to share it, you can't really tell all the stories that are out there. So that's basically what I feel. I have like a broader picture of that, not just about the show, But yeah, I love it.
Definitely. I 100% agree. There was a lot of interesting dynamics with the women, and I love that, like you mentioned, whole representation. There was
Oh
people of
yeah.
color in the show, of course, which is Churi. Like I mentioned, we usually see like someone of that's a majority, or that's a male. So to see a
Mm.
person of color and then see strong women, it's great to see that representation, which I really appreciated. Like I mentioned, I am a queen myself, so maybe we're gonna hopefully get some of that LGBT representation, but we'll see as the show progresses. We have some other characters. So one of my favorites who were introduced was Prince Viridian. So I love a good bad guy. I love a good antagonist, and we can kind of see that already from him. We see he's first introduced basically between the two knights, where they talk about his plan. We don't know what he's up to. We don't know what he wants to do, but I'm gathering that he's trying to take over Evian, Eviellan. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
it's a
hard
tough
to
one. It's
pronounce
a
these
tough one.
names. Yeah. The other tribe, basically. So, what did you guys think about him? He basically approached the tribe leader, went to her and said that he has this plan, and she mentions a prophecy. So I want to know what's going to happen there. Ben, what was going through your mind during that whole scene between him and the other tribe leader?
Yeah, very interesting, first of all. So I still don't really understand what he's trying to do with this like prophecy and all that kind of stuff. I still didn't figure it out. And then I was really surprised though, because out of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, this guy has superpowers. He has something going on, right? Because out of a sudden he opens his hand and kind of like this wind is coming up or whatever it is. And I was like, oh wow, that's very interesting. I didn't expect this show to have people with superpowers, to be honest. I didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very surprising to me. And then as we see moving on in the storyline, he is killing her, right? Like out of the blue, like crazy. That was very brutal because I knew that he's the antagonist and like the bad guy in a way, but that he's killing her like on the spot. That was like, okay. That was surprising.
Yes.
And then we have that scene where he's basically is burning her, right? Or basically setting her on fire and is taking in, I feel like almost her powers or something. That's how it looked to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it felt like, okay, he's kind of taking all her powers into within his body now and is probably even more powerful than before. But that's all I know and all I feel so far about this scenario.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I feel like he was taking her essence. Like, I don't know if you guys have
Yeah.
played Mortal Kombat, but it's very like Shang Tsung vibes of like absorbing her
That's a good point.
essence and like taking her power. So yeah, Mortal
I
Kombat's
did
my
play
game.
that. I did
Yeah.
play that.
Tori, what do you think about that whole scene?
Yeah, it was actually a quite interesting scene. I was looking forward to see what powers she had, because we're kind of introduced to this character and we're not really introduced to the powers that she possesses and why he wants them so bad, or the power that she has over her community. So I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see that, but I guess we'll get to see all of those powers, I guess, intertwine into the guy. I also wanted to know how that affects the prophecy, because when she was explaining the prophecy, she did say that she was a part of it and that she was supposed to support one side of the prophecy. And now that she's gone and now that she's dead, how does that change the storyline? That's what I'm really interested to see.
Definitely, I think it's definitely going to be a lot to take in. So
yeah, I was like, that's funny that you mentioned that, because I have a feeling maybe because he was taking in all the essence from her right now, that he basically took her position by doing that. So maybe that's the whole reason, because she said the prophecy can't be fulfilled without me being here.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he did that at the end, setting her on fire, now taking all what she had within his own body, makes him probably able to do that now in her position on behalf of her. I'm just predicting. I'm not sure.
Yes. I agree with that. I think that could definitely be a possibility. And he seems really evil, like you mentioned, super brutal, just murdering her on the spot with no remorse. So we'll see how his character plays out, but I'm sure he's just a big antagonist, and I love the good antagonist, especially when he looks like that. He looks good. So we'll see how that goes.
That's true.
All right. So any other thoughts on that little scene before we move on?
No.
No, I think it's just so many things going on. There were so many "why are you doing that" moments that I hope are explained in the episodes to come. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Same here. All right. So going back to Churi real quick, of course, he's the main character, so he has a lot going on. But what was the big moment was after he conquered those, I guess, first trials, they had the final trial. And I'm not even going to try and say what the final trial was, because I'm going to butcher that name too. But basically, they had to stay over the night in a burial site. It's the burial site of all the knights passed before them. And they weren't allowed to look at each other, talk, speak a word, go outside above anything. But we see Tiuri basically go outside. There's someone banging on the door saying, "Let me in, I need your help." And everybody says, "Don't open the door, we're gonna get in trouble." But Tiuri does it. He sees the old man and the old man says he needs help. So the old man brings him to his leader or his master, who says that he needs to be in contact with the king. So we see the letter for the king. There's the title of the show. And it's definitely an interesting moment in the show of this is basically setting off the whole season, setting off the whole series, that this is the quest that Tiuri is going to go on, and it's going to be really interesting. So what did you guys think? Tori, what did you think of that whole scene and how it set everything up?
I'm not going to lie. I did not want him to open up that door. I didn't.
Really?
I just felt like, no, I didn't. And I know that sounds terrible because the guy obviously needed help, but hear me out. So they're trying to do this final test. You know, we already know that Tiuri has so much to prove because he basically finessed his way into this group in the first place. And the whole test is to not leave your post or not leave this vigil that we're standing at. And the one thing that you do is leave your post. And I was so frustrated because I wasn't sure. At first, I really wasn't sure if it was just like a test to see if they were going to stick to their vows, if the guy really needed help, if he was paid off by the knight that was teaching them to kind of test them a little bit. So I really wasn't sure. And that's why I didn't want him to open it, because I didn't want him to open it and then fail the test. You know, he's already came this far and he already has to prove so much. I didn't want him to mess it up already. But I guess if he hadn't opened up the door, we wouldn't have the rest of the series. So I'm glad that he did. In the moment, I definitely did not want him to. So,
right. No, I get what you're saying. When he was yelling outside, right? I was like, oh my God, that's a creepy guy. You shouldn't really open the door, right? I thought that too for a second. But then I was like, isn't that interesting that if you have someone, or you get to see someone who seems very weak, like physically at the beginning, maybe, and maybe not has the same power like all the other ones in this competition. But at the end of the day, it's interesting. Like, this guy is just trusting his guts, and he feels like, from a human being perspective, I just have to do something right now, which basically makes him stronger than anyone else in this room. You know what I mean? So it's not about the competition in general. It's just about who are you as a person, and are you able to go the whole way, especially with this adventure that he's facing right now. And at the end, you see he's the only guy who's opening the door, which shows me that he's the only guy who can do that. What's going to come up for him next? All the other guys would have never done it because they're not able to have the same, how do you say, internal strength, you know? It's not about like physically, but before they just show battles about physical strength. They just show people like fighting and having these strides. But when it comes to like the mental state, I think he's stronger than anyone else.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really interesting points, because it actually, even though I was frustrated in the moment, it took me back to the bar scene when his stepdad was kind of like speaking on his behalf. And although he might not be the strongest, he is very compassionate and he has a loving heart, regardless of all the things that he's been through. And I think that was definitely shown when he did make the decision to go open up the door. You know, you hear this man who is crying out for help, and he could have made the decision like I wanted him to in the beginning to kind of stay put, but he decided to use, you know, his own character to judge his decision, and ultimately it was the right decision to make.
Definitely. So I agree, and definitely I like how you brought up the whole dynamic in the bar with the stepfather, because it's definitely a huge moment. But the only reason I thought it was weird was the fact that he defended him and then literally just did the opposite right after, with the whole paying off. So I was like, why would you even bother defending him if you know you're gonna do what he's not? You know, he isn't like that way. You know, he has such a strong moral compass, which we're seeing in the whole show. We're seeing that he didn't like the fact that he was paid off. He went to help someone against everyone else's, you know, advice. So I think it's definitely going to set off that hero journey that we're used to, of that main protagonist who just wants everything to work out for everybody. You know, he's very compassionate. So we'll see how it plays out. But that is basically, everybody, that is our recap for episode 1 of The Letter for the King. So now we're going to get into some fun special segments.
Ooh.
Yay! All right, so we're doing something super fun called The Greatest Battles in History with Tori. So girl, take it away.
Yes, no, this battle is actually quite interesting, and I low-key feel like I should have been a part of it because we have so many things in common. So it's called the Battle of the Tours. Obviously, I'm a Tour myself. And it was in AD 732, and it also took place in October, and my birthday is October 1st. The connection. So according to historyextra.com, this battle marks the furthest advancement of Muslim army into Western Europe. So that was very, very interesting. Just a little bit of context. I'm reading this again from historyextra.com. The Muslim army was threatening central northern France, which we all know are heavy hitters in themselves. They felt that they were so much, France felt like they were so much of a threat that they actually joined forces. Some of the Christian leaders joined forces with their armies to push out the Muslim army themselves. But the Muslim was still able to make a really heavy encounter and get really far with their efforts. And this battle actually happened between Tours and Poitiers, I hope I got that right, on October 10th. So that was one of the great battles. Of course, they weren't able to win, but it was one of the furthest advancements in Western Europe.
Wow. Nice.
Wow.
Very cool.
I feel, wow, you know more about my own history than I do. Like, I have to do something. That's awesome.
I love it. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Tori. That was a great special segment.
No problem. And I also want to throw in another tidbit that made this battle kind of interesting. So the French were actually known to fight on foot, but in this particular battle, they created like a wall of ice where they used their shields and decided to fight off the army, and that's how they were able to still win. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It kind of gave me like Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones type of feel. So that was an interesting tidbit from that battle.
Very 300 from very Spartans from 300, so interesting as well. I like that. Wow. All right, awesome.
I'm more educated now.
For sure. So am I. All right, thanks, Tori. All right, now we're gonna move into some fun news and gossip with Ben.
Oh yeah, and I hope everyone can see it. I found an article that I just wanted to talk about very quickly, because after the first show was aired, what was very interesting that we had a lot of different opinions online. So a lot of people, and Tori, you mentioned that already, you are a big fan of Game of Thrones, right? Which was a huge success. So I feel like, you know, we talk about that even more in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to mention that a lot of people obviously did the same thing. So they compared the show with Game of Thrones, with all these kind of fantasy shows that we have, with The Witcher even, right? And we did an after show for The Witcher 2. So, and what was interesting is that a lot of people feel like, oh, you know what? I mean, it's kind of an interesting show, but it's definitely not as strong as Game of Thrones and The Witcher. And then I found this article, and the cast is also talking about the reactions that they saw online. And what is interesting, what they say is, you know what? We feel like this is a great fantasy show, not just for people who like The Witcher or Games of Thrones with this specific topic, but this is more like a family show. You know, they specifically say, hey, we have young kids here right now. They're trying to find their way in life. So it's not just about this fantasy topic, but it's more about, hey, we trying to discover ourselves as young kids to make our own way in life. And I feel this is a very great approach, because I think it's really hard to compare this show with a show like Game of Thrones. I mean, come on, this was one of the biggest shows ever on the planet we've ever had. So I think it's really hard to compare any show coming after Game of Thrones with that show. You know, you know how it is. People are kind of like, they have their opinion already because they're kind of, you're influenced if you want it or not, right? You basically saw the show, you're influenced by the show, you have certain things still in mind, and out of a sudden a new fantasy show comes out and you compare it with the show that you saw, obviously. But I just wanted to have your approach, and also the audience maybe at home, if you want to write us, that would be appreciated. How do you feel about that? Because I read so many comments, you know, it's not as strong. I would have loved to see even like more sex. Sex was a topic, guys. Seriously, sex was a topic. I'm not kidding you.
Poor children.
I know, but that was a topic, you know, and a lot of people talked about those things. So Tori, I mean, you as a fan of Game of Thrones, how do you feel about that, comparing it to one of your favorite shows?
Yeah, that was also some debate that I saw online as well. I mean, the minute that you open up the show, you can see that it's not going to be similar to Game of Thrones because of the rating alone. I mean, this show is rated PG, and we know that Game of Thrones is definitely not PG. So you already know there's going to be filtered content that isn't the same as Game of Thrones. And I think you brought up a very interesting point, is that this is a little bit more family friendly. Younger people and younger audiences who like this type of fantasy world are able to kind of join in. You know, they weren't really a part of the Game of Thrones realm because of the type of content that was in that show. So I think this kind of opens the door for younger audiences who do want to explore and see, hey, is this a genre that I actually like? I think we all, as Game of Thrones fans, do have this kind of void that now that this show that we've watched for years is over and it didn't really end the way that we wanted to, we kind of have this like longing for something to come along and bring in that closure or bring in something, to kind of fill that void. But this doesn't necessarily have to be that. There are shows that can exist in that realm that's not put here to replace Game of Thrones or to be an extension of Game of Thrones. And I think we have to kind of keep that in mind. When I came into the show, I definitely wanted to keep an open mind with the new kingdoms, learning the dynamic, because I'm not back in the Seven Kingdoms. I'm not, looking for the Queen of the North and things like that. This isn't the same show. So I think it's just important to be open-minded and knowing that we're starting over. We're starting with a different context. We're starting with a different history. Of course, there's going to be similarities drawn and comparisons and stuff like that because they are pretty similar, but hopefully this show is able to find its own identity in the world of Game of Thrones and The Witcher and stuff like that.
For sure. No, it's a great summary. That's exactly how I feel. For sure.
I've actually never watched Game of Thrones, and I'm a lover of all things like medieval kings and queens, but people are always shook that I never watched it. I'm probably going to do it now because I have HBO, but I agree that I just from what people have told me about Game of Thrones, it is not that. There is no incest. I mean, we haven't seen it yet. So we'll see how that goes. I'm a huge fan of CW, and one of my favorite shows of all time is called Reign. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but it's an amazing show. Yes. So I kind of got those vibes from here, kind of similar to Game of Thrones, though it's not as CW-like, of a little bit more sensual, a little bit more like flirtatious. It's definitely more kid-friendly, but still those kings and queens vibes of that hero journey and everything like that. I loved it. I definitely thought it was Reign, and I miss Reign, so it gave me that kind of similar Game of Thrones void that I needed.
No, for sure. I mean, the interesting thing is, when we watched Witcher, you can tell. I mean, it's Henry Cavill. I mean, what else do I have to say? Come on, he's like. I mean, you know how it is. Like, I mean, sex sells too. We can talk about that, right? I mean,
he
was
like
cast
that.
because. I mean, he's like a sex symbol, I guess, for a lot of people, right? So he's this good-looking guy, obviously playing the lead on The Witcher. So of course, it's about the fantasy environment that you have on The Witcher too, but it's definitely also because of him and his character, right? And the kind of scenes that you have with the women having like some sexual sense in it and stuff like that. So I think that also makes the show, The Witcher, very exciting. And yeah, for the little king, the letter for the king. You said I changed the title already. What I feel is like, I'm not sure what it is, but when I watch the show, it goes a little deeper. I think we mentioned that already about characters, about like finding your own way in life. So I think there's a lot more that you can discover than just about the fantasy or the sex component here right now. So I really appreciate that, actually. So yeah, we'll see.
Yes, I love that. We'll see how it goes in the rest of the show. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, guys.
We have a recap. We did a special segment, did some news, and now our last thing, we're just going to do some predictions. We don't have sound effects, so let's see. All right. So who wants to go first? Take it away.
Tori, please.
My brain is so all over the place. I really don't know what's going to happen, but I think I definitely want to explore the dynamic between Tiuri's mom and his stepdad, just kind of like how they are. We've kind of only seen them just exchange a couple words. We don't really see like their behind closed doors, like backstory or chemistry and stuff like that. So I definitely want to kind of get more context between like how they fell in love and their love story, because it's not really something that we've seen. I do want to see the rest of the Esquires kind of join Tiuri in this voyage that he's about to take and kind of see their dynamic play out. But I think they're for sure going to have a lot of obstacles. I mean, they're still kids. So I don't know what's going to happen. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I haven't even thought about the relationship between the mom and the stepdad. Really interesting, because we haven't really seen them interacting so much. Right, so that's basically something. Yeah, that's a very good point. But I'm really also interested is now Prince Viridian. I hope I said it correctly. This guy is very mysterious, right? I mean, he's this charismatic guy from the beginning at the end, and then out of a sudden he just kills her on the spot for some reason, right? And I just feel like that he has a lot more power than we think he has. So he did something like with his hands already, but I think because he was taking all that stuff in from her right now, even got him to another level. So I'm really interested and excited to see what he's able to do now. Because I also like a good antagonist, by the way. I think that makes a good story as well, right? I mean, you always have the hero, but you need someone fighting against. So I really like him, and I just want to see what he's really able to do, because now we can tell they still keep these storylines very separate from each other, right? So we never have any interaction. So I definitely want to see how they combine those storylines at some point and how they're going to work that out. So that's the main thing I would like to see.
I also, if I can jump right in, the Tiuri also is hearing these voices from God knows where. So I also want to see how I don't know if there could possibly be a power that he has that that's revealed later on, if it's connected to the powers that the other guy has. I'm kind of interested to see how this, I guess, like supernatural or power element plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, when you said that, I totally didn't think about it, but I think I'm going to call that as my prediction too. Is just maybe we're going to see that whole final battle, and it's going to be between Tiuri, who everyone thinks is just this meek little kid who doesn't know anything or can't do anything, but he's going to have these magical powers, and he's going to be able to vanquish Prince Viridian. So we'll see how that goes. That's my prediction.
Very good point. Oh wow, let me add that very quickly. Now that you said it, I also thought, I forgot about that. I also think that Tiuri also has superpowers that he doesn't even know about yet.
I love it. I love a good magic, fantasy, medieval. This is just doing it for me. And that is pretty much our show, guys. Thank you so much. And everybody, Tori, first, tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Yes, they can find me on Instagram at Toxic Model, or they can find me on Twitter at Tori with 2 E's.
Yay. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Benjamin Schnau, Schnau, like the dog. That's what I'm always saying, right? And we also do the show. Dispatches from Elsewhere. Also very interesting show with Jason Segel, right? That's every Tuesday. And we also going to do the show on Thursday, Deaths, also on Hulu. Very interesting show, guys. Check it out.
Nice. All right. Well, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at the Bryant Santos. You can also catch me on the Friday Night SmackDown, Katie Keene After Show, and Women's Wrestling Weekly. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.